First of all, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an amazing 2 days. Learned a lot. I've been typing away like a fiend. I'm Jean-Pierre Lacroix. I'm president of SLD. We're a brand transformation organization that specializes in the financial institutions. I think Stephen's one of our clients, and we've also done US Bank here. We're going to talk about a subject very dear to me, and I think to you also, because there's an old saying that says, what gets measured gets done, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And that couldn't be more true when you look at transformation happening in the banking industry. We heard a lot about this morning humanizing consumer experience and how we leverage our employees and our customers as part of that journey. But what are the metrics banks are using? And we asked that question. That great, and you can scan that. We asked that question and published an Lacroix study, return on experience. We wanted to find out, what are the banks measuring? And we did the same thing with consumers. We wanted to find out, how do the consumers evaluate a financial institution? And where's the correlation and where's the divergent facts? And what we found out in the study, that less than half of the banks measure some type of return on experience. The majority measure financial performance of the organization. But the consumers evaluate the financial institution based on their experience. So we know that if a customer has a bad experience, there's a high likelihood they're going to switch banks. And if you look now, most financial institutions in this room are closing branches, relocating them, opening yourselves up for defection from your customers. And so today's session is really going to focus on talking about measuring what matters. And I have here, I'm very fortunate to have some top bankers, and I'm going to start with person to my immediate left. Sérgio, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Sérgio Magalhães. I'm responsible for the digital channels and branches in Millennium BCP in Portugal, in Europe. And at this time, we are investing a lot in digitalization, of course, but also in customer experience and trying to measure all that matters. And that's why this subject is also grateful for me.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate, first to have Sérgio fly all the way from Portugal. But more importantly, he's going to share some data with us that a lot of us would probably be uncomfortable sharing with our colleagues in this room of how they measure performance in their branches, and it'll give you some insights on maybe some of the metrics you may be wanting to look at. Next.
Thank you, JP. My name is EJ Kritz. I'm with APC. You may have formerly known us as Eighth Power Consulting. We're a roughly 25-year-old customer experience research and training company. Our unique proposition is putting things like CX research and measurement, things like surveys and shops under the same roof with training of your employees. I'll give two quick plugs too as part of my introduction. I have the absolute pleasure of being on the advisory board for the Interactive Customer Experience Association, which is associated with this meeting here. A fantastic nonprofit group that I invite you to join. And for those of you who are banks, it's a free membership. JP and I lead a monthly conversation that's sort of an extension of this meeting. Getting banks and credit unions together once a month for just an hour of robust sharing and conversation. JP and I also co-founded the H2D Collective, which you can find at h2dcollective.com, a group of like-minded vendors here to help bridge that human and digital experience. So excited to be part of this great panel, and thanks for being here.
Great.
Stephen Griffin with Regions Bank. I spoke yesterday during the keynote, and I run the retail distribution planning for Regions Bank, and I am actually participating in JP's and their panel there that they've got. So it's a great informative panel, and I enjoy it. It is a lot of robust debate and conversation that goes on during that, but it's also very informative because we walk away with a lot of things that we can turn around and use and talk to our folks in our institution about. So, and I'm glad to be here with you guys. So.
Well, thank you very much for all three of you for participating. I'm going to start the first question with you, Stephen. How do you measure performance for Regions Bank? What are the metrics you guys follow?
Well, I mean, we measure a lot of different things. I think, like you were saying in the early going, JP, one of the problems probably that we do measure is we have a hard time measuring that return on experience that you're talking about. But a lot of the key core elements that we measure, especially on the consumer side, really is the performance of the associates. How are they doing? Are they selling the correct products? Are they doing the right things in that aspect? Financially, how are they driving the bank? Down to kind of a quantitative number that we give them every month that they can see what the value of what they sold is and did for that time period in the branches. We also look at our customer experience from a standpoint, how they delivered that customer experience through Gallup. We worked with those guys quite a bit and have very extensive surveys that not only talk about, okay, here's how you delivered the customer service to the branch, but it also measures the customer experience inside the branch. What about this branch made you feel special? What about when you walked in, were you greeted? Is the layout easy to navigate, manage? Did you feel like you got the right advice and guidance? Did you feel like you got the right type of service there? And that's very key and informative, especially for me, because I'm looking at it, and I talked about that a little bit yesterday. I'm looking at it a lot and making sure, and we really just started measuring that probably in the last 9 months to see the difference we were making in the way we were doing our banking and the way we've made some big changes. And it's been very eye-opening to see how well it's been received. But and beyond that we have, we also engage in what we call our our associate engagement survey. We want to make sure that our associates are completely engaged in what they're doing, and it helps us understand. And it is not just in our physical locations like our branches; it's in our back offices too. So, me as a leader at the bank, I can understand how my employees feel about do they have the correct tools? Do they feel like they're missing something? Have they, even down to have you received praise in the last 6 months, or have you been talked to about your career advancement in the last 3 months? Things like that we do to measure engagement, and we get an engagement score on our associates and those locations, so we can manage to that and know that, okay, by this score I can tell this department, this branch, whatever, is completely engaged, and Regions has done a good job of making sure their employees stay engaged. But it's an opportunity to take a look at if you've got a struggling location, your quality service scores aren't great, your associate engagement is not great. You measured those two things, and and the performance is lagging. You can really go in and diagnose the problem from that aspect.
How about yourself, EJ? You really focus on kind of the frontline employees and how they're engaged with customers. What are the metrics that you look for when you evaluate a financial institution?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to Stephen for saying the word engagement. I think, not to be too blunt, but I think employee satisfaction as a metric is dead, and I only know that because I'm trying to bury it myself. So I don't care if your employees are satisfied. I don't. I want them to be engaged. And we just did a study for a bank that found that engagement was low. Net promoter, from an employee engagement standpoint, was a negative number, all right? And yet, we found at the same bank, 87% of their employees have no intention of leaving anytime soon. So they're all super comfortable. They're all super happy. They're not doing a good job, but they're also not going anywhere. So we really have to raise the bar in terms of what are we measuring and being smart about the questions that we're asking employees, not to find out if they're simply happy, but to find out if they're truly engaged. A happy employee shows up to work every day. They probably even get you good customer satisfaction scores. They do a fine job, but they're not going to do anything to actually enhance the place. They're not going to do anything to create the culture that you seek. So certainly measuring engagement at a higher level. I also appreciate measuring human behavior. So we were talking a little bit about this morning over breakfast. We offer a behavioral assessment tool for employees in both the pre-hire and post-hire. phases. And an organization that I work with, they found that their back office employees were particularly disengaged compared to those on the front lines. And the solution that they thought that they would put into place was pizza parties and fun Fridays and all these, let's get everybody together. The problem was what they didn't take into account was that the majority of those back office employees are wildly introverted. So let's take a bunch of introverts. Let's make them happier by putting them into forced social situations. So if we can measure kind of both ends, not only the feeling, but the human drive that created it, awesome. And the last thing I'll say is on the customer satisfaction side, look, NPS, y'all love it, y'all do it, I'm sure. The big thing that I ask is don't incent on it unless it's to your executive leadership team. I have a really hard time punishing a teller on their variable compensation because the customer was really upset that your ATM network went down. And that happens every day. So I would prefer things like customer effort score, just a raw customer sat score on that specific, but by all means measure NPS. I like NPS. But I really struggle with the idea of incenting on it. So I'd say for a bank that says, we run into a lot of banks, I'm too small to do post-transaction surveys. I go, maybe not. So to be really thoughtful about that blend between relationship surveys, maybe even old school mystery shopping, panel studies, post-transactional survey, there's just such a broad array that to simply say, this one way of serving is the way to go, I think these days would be a bit irresponsible. So customer sat surveys, employee engagement surveys, and measuring the human behaviors of the folks in your shop. Those are my big three, JP.
EJ, you brought up an interesting point about engagement. When you think of the silent resignation, I was just reading an article this morning, where people are actually, your employees are actually, a lot of them, a percentage of them, are actually resigned from your bank. They're just doing the bare minimum to get by, but they're not doing the extra effort to deliver on the brand promise. And I think having those metrics that can weed out those individuals, either try and shift their mindset or find replacements, I think would be a lot more important today than it was before the pandemic, because we see that as a significant challenge for the hiring process and the retention process. You may not want to retain these individuals because they're actually detrimental to the growth of your institution. So Sérgio put together a 120-slide presentation, which had a lot of great, I've got the slides by the way, great statistics of his bank. I've asked him to limit it for confidentiality reason to the front end of the presentation. I think you're going to be really impressed. I always look for, people ask me, where do I get my inspiration for what is a great customer experience? I said, the future's already here. It's not evenly distributed. The fact is there are a lot of institutions, financial institutions that are doing a great job on CX. They're just not, it's not ubiquitous. You have to search and find them. And I would say that Millennial Bank, if you want to follow an institution for learning, this is one of the banks you should be following, because they are, first, Europe's ahead of the curve when it comes to the role of the branch and the digitization of banking, but also the metrics that they use. So I'm going to pass this on, Sérgio.
Okay. Thank you. So after what you said, for me it will be difficult to raise the bar.
If we can just move the slide, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So talking about what measuring what matters, it's not only, okay. First of all, we are a based institution in Portugal, but we also have a huge operation in Poland and also in Mozambique. But looking only for the operation in Portugal as a whole, what we really know is that it's the customer that is driving this satisfaction. So we have a huge amount of data and computing power on the banks, legacy systems for all, but we are not doing nothing with that. And because of this, we are using processed jobs with this data and are not looking at the customer. And we have hundreds and hundreds of information about what our customers are doing, how they are behaving in our banks. And we are just financial, making reports about what they are doing and sending to the customer. But the expectation now, as we know, it's more than ever. That's why they are searching for neobanks and they are searching for our different platforms. And because we know that each customer is a special customer, is the special one, and won't be treated as that. We know that, but how to do it, it's the problem. Because they won't be treated like that on the right time, nor before, nor after. They want to know everything, and they want privacy, because they are expecting that the bank delivers this privacy that they need. And of course, I don't know how it is in the United States, but in Portugal and in Europe, we have a very, very regulated bank, and we don't have the same level playing fields that the neobanks has. So where Revolut and 26 can go everywhere, do whatever they want, but the incumbent banks have regulatory, very, very exclusive for GDPR, for everything they have. So we have huge regulatory to do it. And we know, like that, all these mix, we say we have a fun journey in front of us, and we have to deal with different speeds because we have legacy and we have microservices and clouds and everything that is new technologies delivering on the bank, and also the changing speed because the technology that today is the newest technology, the best one, the next 5 years probably there'll be another one, and we have to be always doing with this speed. So what I always say that this transformation is measuring what matters. Because first of all, the shift away from physical facilities continues. I don't know, probably in United States is like that, in Portugal, in Europe, it's all the way around. I have to sense they don't want to go to the branch, for sure. Second, when we are asking the brand experience you want the branches to be known for, everybody wants to say omnichannel availability. They want to be treated as the special one in every channel, special one in mobile, special one in the site, special one in the branch. Then most banks are focused on this omnichannel differentiation. And we know that we have to deal also with cash. I was saying that I arrived to O'Hare, and I buy a ticket for CTA, and none of my credit cards were working on the CTA machine. So I was lucky because I have a $10 in my pocket, so I have to buy the ticket with the cash. So the cash still exists because of many different reasons. And in Portugal, we are moving a lot of this for ITMs and trying to create also a great experience in ITMs. But for all of this, we know that we have to change, and this efficiency and customer experience will drive this branch reinvention, will drive the reinvention in all those channels. But we decided this journey not now, but long years ago. And this starts, first of all, to transform the branches. So we created in 2014 what we call at the time the branch of the future. Now is the branch of the past, of course. And we know that we try to adapt what we saw the branches to everyday life. We know that the customers must be welcomed by the staff the same way they are welcomed when we come to a hotel. And the majority of banks don't do that. The people sit down, oh, it comes another customer. No, they must be treated as special one in the first step they put on the branch. And we have to teach them people. That's why the branch staff went to an extensive training program. That's why we create this digital experience lounge, this self-service area. We launched the first ITM in 2014, and we put them available 24 hours, 7 days per week. And this was important to be part of the cashless branches, but they are cashless only because we don't have more tellers, human tellers, but the tellers help people doing every transaction on ITMs. And the second one is about the self-assisted area, of course, and the servicing, the way they are servicing. We put also music on some branches and a new aroma to create an environment like they were entering in a shop, a mall, or something different as a bank. So we make all those experiences in 2014. We didn't know that we don't need so much branches at the time, but we know that what branch, whenever we need, will be special places where people can go and feel that they are not just banking. So all and one of the most important things is because you can measure, but first you have to train the employees. You cannot measure them, just measure because they don't know how to do it. We first teach them how to do it, how to receive a customer. So we decide this route number one, this customer experience. And what is the route number one? Why? We say that this is route number one based on the story of Route 66. And that is very known in the United States. And you know that a lot of people in Europe have the dream to make the Route 66. So we create this environment about the Route 66 and saying, okay, why the Route 66? Because it's a number that is very easy to know. And at the time, we're saying that 66 was the percent of customers that was changed to other brand just because of bad service. And we put this in the mind of everybody on the bank, 66. 66 were changing if they had a bad experience. They could not have a bad experience in any of other channels. And we put this in mind in everyone giving this training. How we do after this training? This training starts with this part of customer empowerment, to looking at the end-to-end process, knowledge level, decision-making power. The second one about the first interaction with the user. So we had to say to our employees, they have to solve every problem for the customers at the first time. So we create a customer effort score, employee ownership culture, and follow-up process. So after this, we create this first interaction resolution goal. And the third, of course, the human approach, because everybody must be treated as special. The voice of the customer was important to measure, the customer life cycle touch points, and the communication skills for our customers. So customers for our employees. So we have to train everybody on these first aspects and create personas and create environment for people to learn how to do it. What was the result? Everybody was trained, everybody was, we say to everybody, after being trained, everybody has the obligation to doing well. We'll do a lot, thousands of mystery shoppings, trying to understand if this is working or not. So we create this route model, in Portuguese is route because receiving, obtaining the information, using the resources, turning experience into results, and exceeding expectations. And each of these steps was accurately trained for everybody. How to receive, you know, usually people were seated like that. And the first thing that we say is, you cannot sit. You see a customer entering, and you must stand up and say, welcome to our branch. My name is, and smile, 7 seconds. If everybody is smile, 7 seconds, the customer will feel like special one, okay? So this is very important steps. And you can say, why to teach? Because they have probably 20 years of banking receiving customers. No, they don't know how to receive. They still seated on the computer. And it's very important to receive the customer very well. So this route model was something very important to the training. And of course, we have the results. The first results were we feel that we are more proximity about the customer. So we are considered the closest bank for the customers. The other banks, the most important banks in Portugal, are the other ones that in gray, but we start in 5.1 in the measure of mark test, and we end the year with 58.2. And what we say, we achieved the first in experience. And you know, every year we are measuring for independent entities, the customer, the large bank, customer choice. And we won this since we gave this training 2017, 2017 we didn't won, but 2018 won, 2019, 20, 21, and 22 we still won. And nowadays we have a lot of channels, not only the branch, we are closing branch, but at the same time we are always measuring what matters, and that's why we say that the formula and the challenge is still the same. We keep it close to the customer and measure what matters, independent of what channel we are achieving. That's it.
Thank you very much, Sérgio. So I'm kind of curious. One of the insights I got when I looked at this morning was that they branded the transformation and they packaged it so that the employees would understand and remember the key messages. How many of you in your transformation, in your onboarding your employees, have a branded program of transformation that is targeted towards the employees, your frontline staff? How many banks here have a branded program? 1, 2 banks, 3. Yeah, so there's a real opportunity, the low-hanging fruit. You know, how do you most banks do a fantastic job marketing the consumer. They do somewhat of a poor job marketing their employees. And so, you know, if you take the same discipline of communication and strategy and apply that to how you communicate transformation and change management and behavior to your employees, and you make it simple and easy to remember with, you know, Route 66, it makes it easier for them to grasp what you're trying to achieve, right? Because they've got their day job. This is kind of a layer on top of that day job, which is, you know, change your behavior. And if we make it too complicated, we lose them in the transition, or they get confused, which is even worse. So that would be just, when I looked at this, is one of the thoughts that came to mind is an opportunity to brand, and it talks to your culture of your organization. So the second question I had is, you know, back to Steve, you know, what metrics, we currently measure a lot of metrics on ROI and performance of the branch. We were talking about that, and it kind of drives which branches get closed and all of, you know, the compensation. But what are the metrics you feel are missing that you would want to have in place to measure return on experience? What would be those metrics you think are missing within Regions Bank?
You know, I don't, one thing, I'd like to step back just a second and say two things, if I can. One, I think, you know, JP, when you were talking about earlier looking at the associates and making the determination of, what are you going to do with these guys? Are you going to, I mean, I take it even a step further and go and understand the questions, and that's what I love about our associate engagement survey, is it's really engaging you to say, not only how do you feel about how you work, but how do you feel you're being led? And so sometimes it's not just that associate, and if it's the group of associates, you've got to understand, okay, is this feeling coming from the leader being disengaged and running it down the ladder? I mean, even though that leader surveys, he's surveying inside with his associates, and so you may not be able to break that out and see that. So that's a question to ask. Just an interesting observation when I heard you say that. And also, one thing I think you nailed it, EJ, when you're talking about don't incent on it, so to speak, or disincent rather, you know, don't make it a negative thing for quality service. But at Regions, back when I ran in incentive programs, it reminded me of the long discussion we had, and we kept trying to figure out what we wanted to do with that service score for those customers and their engagement, and how they looked at the bank. And we, you know, when I'm sitting there, and I said, and now I feel like a genius for saying it, but why don't we bonus the branch off of that and not incent the branch off of that? In other words, if you're doing, you know, if things are in your control, things that are in your control that you can control inside that score, we're going to add 10% to your bonus if you're doing the right things. You know, now it still does have that impact of the customer, right? They can, but I wasn't going to get, the plan was we're going to go in and take 10% off your incentive if your score's below X. And like, that's not the right thing to do here, because we don't know what all they could control and couldn't have controlled. So it's a good point about the incentive piece. What things we could measure? I tell you, we measure a lot of good things when we're looking at our associate engagement and our customer engagement. I think the problem is with us, it gets a lot of focus, and it gets a lot of focus for about 2 months during the year. And we're, you know, I get the email, hey, your survey is done, you get the email that says do the survey, you get the email that says survey's done. Then we have a couple of meetings on it, and then my boss will select 2 things. I'll select 2 or 3 things to work on, during the year, and by 6 months out, everyone's forgotten that it's there. What we saw you guys do is missing, I think, in a lot of banks. If it was a more branded program, so I don't know that we miss a lot in what we measure. I don't think we don't put it together in a format that says, okay, now you can be successful all year long if you remember these processes and what you need to do to keep this going. So next year when we survey you, we're going to see a lifted experience, and that's the problem. It is focused. It does have its purpose and its place, but it needs to be an ongoing and continuing thing, and the only way I think to do that is to build the package like you guys did.
Well, that was the panel this morning. They talked about back to basics, that there's a lot of measurement tools. I think Renee talked about a lot of measurement tools, and they're just not being used. And so the idea of activating on insights is a big challenge for banks. And I think what you're saying is that you do it for a while and it just slips off.
And it loses focus. Now I will say this: we're working through a lot of transformative things at Regions, and I think that's going to be a component of it that's going to continue on and be more of a focus, much like these guys are doing.
Yeah. EJ, what about yourself?
Yeah. So as I'm hearing these guys talk, but also reflecting on some of the conversations from earlier in the week, 2 metrics that, first of all, the branding piece, a gazillion %. Right? I mean, what great added value for your marketing department to help brand a metric, to create a metric that is tangible, that's recognizable, that has a look, that has a feel, that has a vision, that stands for something, right? So be it an outside agency, somebody like JP, your inside shop, that's fantastic. 2 measurements I wish I saw a little more often. One is 360 assessments. I think most executives, respect to those of you in the room, ignorance is bliss. And so an increase in 360 assessments for the leadership teams with executive coaching, I think is a huge missed opportunity that most of Fortune 500 takes advantage of, but the financial services industry has sort of missed out a little bit. Those of you who read BAI, I wrote something in there a couple weeks ago about the Great Resignation, another branch of the future, right? It's another overly used quiet quitting. So the argument I was trying to make is I don't think there is a Great Resignation. I think there's a great reflection. That's a phrase that's not, I didn't think of that. I heard this from an HR person who's way smarter than me. But, if you have a 40-hour teller who's 65 years old and suddenly decides they want to be home for the grandkids after school and they want to go to 20 hours, they didn't resign, but you still got 20 hours you got to fill. You're still posting a part-time rec. And so you're going to have that pinch of the Great Resignation, but this person didn't resign. They reflected on what their priorities were in life. And I think the global pandemic just sped that along. And you're going to have younger generations who are more tied in with their values who are going to force that even further. So 360 assessments is one. The other one, call it CIC-SAT, Customer Impacting Customer Satisfaction Scores, okay? So why are we not doing surveys on the people whose job it is to serve the people who serve the customer? We should be surveying our front lines on their experiences with deposit ops, with the call centers, whoever they rely on to delight the customer. We got to make sure they're holding up their end of the bargain too. And there needs to be some accountability there as well. And if we're going to put customer satisfaction to variable compensation for our frontline employees, we got to have it for our back office folks too. So when we do brand this awesome program, we're all singing the same song, and it doesn't matter where in the bank you work.
That's great. Sérgio, your thoughts?
I think we have to measure everything we can. Everything we can. If it's NPS, if mystery shopping, we are trying to measure everything we can. And what is the latest measuring that we are using? The scores that we have on the Apple Store and the Android Store. We are measuring that. Because there are several customers that nowadays are more hybrid, and even the complaints about the branch going there saying, this branch was horrible, and this guy was not, and they put there on the Apple store and on the comments on the stores. For example, it's just an example that usually the banks doesn't count. Even there are people that were looking at that, okay, this doesn't matter, these are crazy guys that are using mobile. No, these crazy guys that are using mobile are our customers. And they were saying very important things. And you know, there are guys that go into the stores, for example, saying, your app is good, but it misses this functionality. And you know what is the most important thing that we can do for this customer? And not for only this customer, as a message for all the customers, is saying, 1 month later, please try again because the functionality that you are proposing are already there on your app. Please try it. And this is a message for everybody. So things that you can measure, everything that you can. The stores, everything that is an interaction with the customer, with our bank, must be measured. Everything. We use Firebase, we use Google Analytics, difficult because of, you know that we don't know how the information go there and where to go, but okay. But Firebase for sure, and we are using every click that the customer is doing on the mobile. This mystery shopping is very important. This internal satisfaction from the people that are on the back end, we are also measuring that. So measuring everything you can, and try to mix this as something that makes sense and that can be presented to the board that are on those meetings, and everybody must know the results. Sharing the results with the employees is a very important part of the process. So it's not only for the board to see the numbers and make actionable things. No, sharing the numbers and saying what you are doing for your customer is here. And these numbers are yours also, and sharing the success and the unsuccess with all those employees.
Can I do a quick piggyback real quick?
So, sure.
I'm glad you brought up mobile, because the other thing really to consider, I'm very passionate about new account opening surveys. Love the idea of surveying a customer roughly 21 days after they've opened an account, because by then, all the bad stuff should have happened already. They didn't get their checks, they couldn't enroll in online banking, the app doesn't work, whatever, right? And so I just want to tie this in real quick to sales metrics, because obviously, you've got some scorecard and widgets and all the whatever you do. And if the mobile adoption and enrollment in online banking and those sorts of things aren't part of your day one measurement, I think we'd all agree, maybe not super publicly, but privately, we'd all agree, we would rather a customer walk out with a working mobile app and having enrolled in online banking than having opened a savings account, which is more valuable to you ultimately down the line, and particularly what is going to do the better job in cutting down on future problems for that customer. Our biggest efforts around problem prevention are on the first day. And so if we can measure obsessively the first day of somebody's life with your bank, it's going to clear up a lot of the other headaches you're dealing with.
Yeah, it's all about first impression. I mean, and that's what you then spend the next year overcoming, rebuilding that relationship, that they gave you that trust that you didn't deliver on, which is a big issue. So I'm just one last question, then we're going to open it up for questions from the audience, and that would be, is there conflict between how the leadership team of the institutions measure what matters versus what really is happening that's driving customer loyalty? Stephen, is there a disconnect between a senior leadership team on what they're measuring versus, what the consumers and the frontline staff evaluate as what's driving loyalty?
So I'll answer that two ways. One, I'd say historically, if you look back beyond the last 5-6 years, probably there was. We were measuring what we thought mattered. Somebody, I can't remember who it was that I was talking with today, made the comment of, sometimes we think of the CEOs thinking, what do I want, right? And And because I want that, now we should go do this for everyone, right? And that's not necessarily the case. I would say today at Regions and in the past, truly, we've focused really hard on the customer. We've done a lot of programs to do that, as well as trying to gain that associate engagement over the last few years. Especially, it became a critical point during COVID that we said we're going to understand how you feel. It wasn't okay, you're working from home now, you're doing this, you're doing that. We want to understand how you feel. And I talked a little bit about yesterday how customers felt. Their number one priority was safety in the branches during COVID. Our company made sure that our associates felt that our number one priority was safety for them as well. So, and doing that and measuring those things that we needed to understand and really getting in and reinforcing our associate engagement surveys, during that time period, because the engagement became priority number one really quickly during the COVID time. We were all at home, working from home, and the branches were having to work in such a fractured way that they'd never worked before. So I'd say my company is very connected into that. Again, I do think we could benefit probably, like a lot of folks in here probably were thinking too, that a lot of companies out there could benefit from doing a branded program like Millennium has done. But I would say they understand what matters. I can feel my associates feel that they understand what matters when they do that associate engagement survey. And we are starting to talk about it. And I've actually put emphasis on it this year in a different way. So EJ would probably be proud of me when I say this, because of all the talks he's had, and discussions we've talked during the ICX meetings, is I've got a meeting every month on my calendar throughout the year for associate engagement. So I'm taking it upon myself to say, guys, there are things we need to improve on, and we're just not going to let them fall off the map. We're going to keep going all year with this until your next survey comes around. So again, I think we do an important thing, and I think our company's instilling that engagement. Again, I think we could benefit, though, from some learnings today.
Yeah. Sergio, what about yourself?
So, I think nowadays all the information are available at the speed that we know. And for example, we use a lot the Power BI to share this information, if possible, the most real time as we can. So, and we don't have anymore a CTO. We don't have Chief Transformation Officer. So the transformation is the COO. So the COO wants to be in everything that counts. And nowadays, the measuring what real happens with our customers is something that happens, for example, in the board meetings, in the board meeting special for what happens also in retail, and what we are also trying to do to think that everything that happens or real happens with our customers is perceived by the board's members and the COO, is trying to break all those silos that nowadays exist. For example, before this year, we had the CRM, for example, depending for the retail banking. So the CRM are in the retail banking. So nowadays, the CRM depends on the board, because the CRM is the customer 360. Doesn't make sense the CRM being inside the retail. And having a marketing for retail nowadays is something that doesn't make so much sense, because nowadays the marketing is also digital. Why having a digital marketing and the marketing for retail? Because otherwise they will measure different things. They don't have the 360 degrees vision of the customer. So I think that, at least in our bank, we are doing a huge effort to breaking all those silos, trying to put together all the information. And you only can break this if you don't have different leaderships for the retail or for the digital, and being the leadership for the board, for the customer, directly board to the customer, as soon as we can.
So I was going to open up to see, because we've got 5 minutes. I just want to see if anybody had any questions for the panel. Yeah, this gentleman over here.
Very informative. I've heard the word survey a lot. Sorry. Very informative. Heard the word survey a lot. I know personally my inbox has the word survey several times a day, and I just groan every single time I get a request for a survey. So I'm curious, how do you actually get people to be either excited or fill out a survey that can be meaningful to your different measurements?
EJ, do you want to answer that question?
Thanks for the question. I think the first place I go to is, are we asking the question to the customer in the venue that they prefer to be communicated with, right? So by all means, very popular, send out email surveys. I'll tell you what, you know what I can't stand? You know the one at the airport? Y'all know the one I'm talking about in the bathroom? Who touches that thing? Right? Yeah. I mean, that's great for like instant gratification, like real quick hit, right? But I really prefer to speak to the customer in the channel that they want to be spoken to. So if you, booked your airline ticket on the app, and now you're getting that survey through some other means, I would say, especially being a guy, no offense, guys don't take surveys, you're probably a little less likely to want to interact because that wasn't the channel that you chose, right? And just one piece I wanted to bring up too is, because these guys talked masterfully about what to go get, I don't care what data you get if you do nothing with it. And so stopping time every now and again to pull up and digest and reflect and create actions according to the data, if you don't do that, you're wasting your money. And I say that, I sell surveys. If you're wasting your money if you don't pull up and think for a bit. So yeah, I think just one quick thing on your question, survey fatigue's a real thing. You gotta be super thoughtful about contact rules, work with your marketing department, figure out when else have we touched this customer, because the reality is the marketing department has their contact strategy. The surveys are probably being sent out through another channel. They maybe talked at some point about, okay, who's on our do not contact list, and that's where the marketing customer experience relationship probably stopped there. So making sure that we have a really thoughtful customer contact strategy, that we're not bugging people too often. And don't be afraid, I don't like being used car dealers, when you get the oil change and, hey, you're gonna get a survey, we really would love all 10s, right? But I do love it when a banker says, occasionally we love to ask our customers for feedback, we'd be honored if you'd share your thoughts. And stop, don't say anything else. Just being open to feedback and teeing up the survey through a very genuine humanistic way, I think is a great way to increase response rates.
Can you buy responses?
Oh yeah.
You can buy anything, yeah. I think we'll do this as a desperation measure. Sometimes we'll do sweepstakes. But this is like where focus groups come into play, right? Mm-hmm. Things like commercial banking customers, virtually impossible to survey the commercial bank. I don't even really like to try to survey the commercial bank. Focus groups, buy them dinner, take them to a golf course, have a third party come in and facilitate a dialogue, do this double-sided mirror, get them on Zoom, whatever. But compensating them for their time, absolutely. My pleasure, thank you.
Just to add to that, we do, for example, that for the customer journeys. In the beginning of the customer journey, we invite the customers to come with us and trying to experiment different things and asking what is wrong, what we can do better for you, and so on. So this is also one measure. This also insights that we are using to improve the customer journey. And this is an improvement that could start on the branch or on the app. So these focus groups are very important, and we are doing this, trying to make lot of interviews. And this is inviting the customer, and then at the end, of course, we're rewarding these customers for their time and grading. And the second thing is that on the route model, the last thing was exceeding expectations. And exceeding expectations means at the end, asking the customer, you are so satisfied that you can really recommend us to other colleague or something that will so like to be treated like you. So this time we understand if the customer is really upset with us or is really happy. So, and after this, of course, We know when they visit the branch, we know when they visit the app, for example, and we are trying to do this using the same channel that the customer uses for asking if he's satisfied or not. For example, if you use the app, we are trying to use the app to know the feedback, but if they are using the branch, they receive a simple SMS just saying you are satisfied or not, nothing more. Just saying 9 or 0 or whatever.
Thank you very much.
Those were two important words, by the way, exceeds and expectations. Obsess over detractors, but also mindful that the expectations were not set by your peers. The expectations were set by Starbucks, Target, the last airline they flew,
Chick-fil-A.
this hotel. They're not comparing you against other banks. They're comparing you against every other service place that they go to.
I'm going to wrap it up here because we've actually run 5 minutes late. So I want to thank our panel here. So let's give them a round of applause.